What's going on, my fellow makers? Welcome back to Keep Making. I'm Matt. Today I'm going to show you how I made this Spirited Away inspired Japanese fortress. Let's get to it.
Shall we begin?
Alright, so before we get into things here, this is actually going to be part one of a bigger project. It's probably going to be 3 or 4 parts long. I'm going to be making 2 skirmish boards that are modular, maybe even 3. And this is going to serve as kind of the centerpiece of one of those that I can take out and put in whatever I want. I recently started playing 40k, so we're going back between, fantasy and 40k, specifically one-page rules and Grim Future and Age of Fantasy. So I want things to be a little bit more modular. If you would have seen my last video where I did the biggest board I've ever made, I love this board. We use it all the time. But because it's not modular, it makes it tougher to switch between the 2 settings. And I don't know, it's just a really heavy board. It doesn't allow me to use all of the other terrain I've spent time making. So I want something that's a little bit more modular and something that we can, mix up and switch between different genres. So without any further ado, let's get into the fortress. So I'm going back to the old faithful, Lane Lovecraft's Asian Adventures Kickstarter. These files are still available for purchase on the Lane Lovecraft website, so I'll leave a link below. I got those files printed out, and you can see a little bit of a spoiler for the rest of the project I'm going to be working on. But moving back to the castle, I'm going to start using some super glue to get all the big pieces together. Now, once I finish gluing everything up, I'm actually going to go about putting in some magnets. I like to magnetize all of my playable interiors. That way it's easy to pop the tops off and then put them back on without having to fidget around with the connection pieces. And that means when I'm traveling with terrain or moving it from the table to the shelf, I won't have to worry about these things sliding off. So you can see me here, I'm just gluing them onto the top. I actually do come back and change this later on, and you'll see that in the next piece I do. But this way works as well. It's just not as stable as the other method. So eventually I did go to a different method to put these magnets in, and this is the easiest way to do it in my opinion. You go where the connection pieces already are and you drill a hole there that corresponds to the size of your magnet. Then you know the piece that you're putting on top of it. If you drill holes out in that top piece as well, you know they're going to line up perfectly. A lot easier than trying to find where they line up, and you'll end up with like a little bit of an overhang if you do it wrong. So now with everything magnetized and assembled. Oh. Okay, so now with everything magnetized and assembled, I can start putting it all together. Now before I move on to any sort of painting, I want to fill in some of the gaps that were made with combining all of the big pieces together. So to do that, I'm using some JV plastic weld, letting it cure, and then I'm going to take a 120 grit piece of sandpaper and just try to smooth it flat. I could have done a lot better job at sanding this, but it's good enough for me. Now we've got everything assembled, we've got some of the gaps sealed, now we can move on to painting the piece. Again, you can see some pieces in the background. Those are going to be for the videos coming up in the future. So to prime all these pieces, I'm going to use a 2-in-1 from Duplicolor. This is Sandable Primer. It's a filler and a primer. And I like to use that on all my FDM prints because it'll fill some of those layer lines. So now that it's all primed and I put about 6 coats of that on there, I'm moving on to this red oxide primer. This is going to serve as my base coat for all of the fortress pieces. Then I'm going to base coat the roofs using this flat green from Vallejo. This is a model paint, and I use this just because the craft paints I was using was not getting enough coverage and it would have taken way longer. So I just decided to eat the cost on the model paint. To do the walls on the interior, I'm going to use this buff color from Vallejo as well, and just going over all of this. This was definitely by far the most annoying part of the build, doing all the base coats. The worst of which being what's coming up next, which was the beige brown that I did for all the wooden elements on the outside and the insides of the building. What you're seeing is like 30-second shots of me just quickly going over this, but this whole base coating process took probably about 3 nights to finish, so it was a little bit taxing. I think it's important to mention too, when you're watching people hobby on social media, you're only getting a small glimpse in. Obviously these steps are being shot in super speed and, you know, turning this days-long project into a 15-minute video. So it's just important not to judge yourself what you're seeing online and just take things at your own pace. Here I'm moving on to the metal elements on the outside, which I decided to paint it gold. Again, I'm going with that Spirited Away bathhouse kind of theme, and so I wanted everything to fall in line that way. For the stone elements, I'm going back to the Old Faithful here. This is the neutral gray. This is a Liquitex artist acrylic paint, but I do like the way it covers. It goes on pretty similar to how model paint does, with a little bit extra drying time, a little bit more thickness there. But this provides a great base coat, and it's a really basic stone color. Then once the stone elements are all finished, I'm doing a little bit of cleanup, making sure everything's the color I want it to be. This was kind of tricky for me. Usually when I'm doing terrain, you're able to spill over a little bit and you can disguise stuff later on in some of the other steps. But because I didn't want to weather this piece too much with like flocks and stuff like that, I had to be really careful and paint in the lines. Finally, once the base coats are all down and I've done all the cleanup work, I can start getting messy. And I'm gonna do that with some black wash and some brown wash. This is my homemade recipe, which is just shoe polish with some water and a little bit of acrylic matte medium. And I mix those together, do a little combination. Then after days of tidy painting on huge surfaces, it was time to get a little sloppy with it. Start applying the wash first on the bottom level, really to bring out this stone texture and all the cracks in between. So I'm just using big flat brush, getting that on as smooth as I can, and I'm going over all the walls areas too, just to give a little bit of shadow in between the wooden windows and stuff like that. And I clean that up a little bit later on, but I want to get some definition on the whole piece, so basically everything gets a one coat at least of black wash. Where the wash was pooling too much, I came in with a wet paper towel and just dabbed a little bit off of it, just to give some variation in the wash pattern and to pull away from the areas it wouldn't be realistically setting if it was rainwater or something. Now I'm coming back in with just the brown wash, going over the areas that are all wood, just to pop out a little bit of color, really bring back that wooden kind of warmer element. And on the insides, I go over the walls in that same brown, just to warm the insides up a bit. Okay, so after the base coats and the wash, here's how we're looking. A little bit glossy still, but that'll dry up eventually. We're gonna now move on into weathering this piece with a bit of dry brushing. This is my favorite paint to dry brush with, Cashmere Tan from Acrylic, or however you pronounce that. This is the best for kind of faking the effect that you have painted wood that's now kind of weathering and chipping off. So it's got like that really nice brown tone, and if you go over especially the shingles here, it really gives the effect of these had been painted green at one point, and now that paint is kind of coming off. So I actually go over all the wooden elements, all the shingles, even the red walls, to give that worn kind of lived in feel. And for all the stone elements, I'm doing a very similar thing, using this slate gray from Deco Art. Just going over the very tallest areas of these rocks, and just with a smaller brush to get some more of those textures. Going to be dry brushing on there, giving us a third tone. We got the base tone, we got the wash and the recesses, and now we're doing the highlights with this dry brush. Now, moving on to some of the smaller details, I'm going to be painting this tatami mat, or this rug that's in the top floor. I first started painting it with some Army Painter blood red, but I didn't like how it was coming out, so I scrapped that idea and just went some flat red from Vallejo, and I'm going to be base coating this entire thing in that. Then I'm going to come in with a gold dry brush to give it that kind of embroidered gold, kind of gilded gold look, and then I'll just line the edges with some red leather from Vallejo to kind of bring in the frame of it. Neat work's done, I can bring out some washes and get a little bit sloppy again. And I do that by mixing this red tone and this kind of umber wash from Vallejo and Army Painter, and I just go over the entire thing. It'll bring out the separation between the gold and the red, and I think it turned out pretty nice looking in the end. Moving up to the walls, I just want to make sure that those washes are just pulling into the corners there. So I'm going to go back over with some really watered down buff and just glaze it on top. That way it'll give a nicer, kind of cleaner, more uniform, more realistic look to the walls. Then to do the final bit of cleanup, I just go in with some flat black from Vallejo, and I'm doing all the tops of the things, just so that when we're playing in there, you know, it's representative of it not being an entire closed off space, that there's a roof kind of on top of there, and I think it just makes them look better when the roofs are off. So before we get into the final reveals here, I just want to take some time and thank you, the viewers. We're sitting at 458 subscribers right now, which is awesome. Thank you all for subscribing and coming along for the journey of my weird, nerdy hobby projects. I also wanted to take some time to thank a few individuals, namely Razzie PC on YouTube. Just left a comment that really inspired me to get going and finally get this project started and finish it and have it up and uploaded to you guys. And then I especially want to thank James Nevitt from Patreon, who was my first ever Patreon subscriber. And just so you guys know, if you wanted to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/keepmaking. Really helps, goes a long way, and you know, you have my eternal thanks for, again, supporting this nerdy thing I do. Not everybody understands this hobby and you know, the appeal of it, so it's nice to just, you know, have a small community of people who get what's going on here and appreciate it too. So thank you all, and without any further ado, let's get into the reveals here.
Shall we begin?
Alright, so that'll do it for the fortress build, guys. Thanks a lot for checking it out. Make sure you're giving this video a like and subscribing if you want to follow along with the journey. If you want to see more of the miniatures I'm painting, because I don't cover that a lot on this channel, you can check me out on Instagram, just at keep_making. Yeah, again, if you want to subscribe to the Patreon, feel free to do so. Helps the channel out a lot, helps the growth here. Patreon.com/keepmaking. And yeah, you know, this project is it's been a bit of a labor to get the motivation to want to start making these videos again, and you know, staying consistent with the hobby. So I just, in the spirit of that, I just want to say, you know, it doesn't matter how long things are taking, just make sure you keep making.